The Golden Obsession. Gold is one of the rarest and most valuable metals on Earth, more ancient than steel, more powerful than kings, and more enduring than empires. The night sky was unusually clear. No clouds, no wind, just countless stars twinkling in the distance. Thousands of years ago, long before Earth even existed, two massive neutron stars collided in a far-off corner of the universe. The explosion shook the cosmos. That violent crash gave birth to heavy elements, including one of the rarest metals, gold. These tiny gold particles are scattered across space, drifting like dust across millions of miles. When Earth was finally formed, some of that stardust sank deep into its crust, hidden in darkness, far from human eyes. Eventually, people found it. Thousands of years before Christ, in Egypt's deserts, along the rivers of the Indus Valley, and in the ancient cities of Mesopotamia, humans unearthed that glittering yellow metal for the first time. They didn't yet know that one day it would decorate crowns, destroy kingdoms, fuel wars, and control human greed like a god. Back then, steel didn't exist. People used stone, clay, and basic metals to make tools. But they saw gold differently. It shone like the sun, never rusted, and stayed bright even after sleeping underground for centuries. They believed it wasn't just metal, it was a gift from the gods. To this day, golden jewelry, masks, swords, necklaces, bracelets can still be found in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs. They believed that in the afterlife, gold would give them honor before the gods. So gold wasn't just decoration, it was a symbol of status and eternal life. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, small villages grew by the rivers. People were learning to farm and trade. There, too, golden flakes were rising from the soil. Local craftsmen melted them down to create thin chains, rings, and patterned necklaces. Gold became currency, something everyone accepted because it was rare, lasting, and beautiful. But humanity's obsession with gold didn't start with beauty. It started with greed. In Mesopotamia's ancient cities, kings sat in torchlit palaces at night counting gold, tracking how much came from which region, who wore the most, and where the richest mines were. Gold meant power, and whoever held power was seen as a messenger of the gods. As trade grew, gold was melted into coins. Camel caravans carried it across deserts and along the Silk Road. Roman emperors bought Chinese silk with gold. From African savannas to European castles and Indian temples, gold became a language everyone understood, but no one ever had enough of. In Rome's palace, Emperor Nero once stood silently, watching barrels of gold coins pour into the treasury. He said, "He who holds the gold holds men's hearts." That statement shaped the next 1,000 years. People ruled with swords, but kings ruled with gold. In Africa's Ghana and Mali empires, gold was so abundant that European explorers were stunned. When Mali's king Mansa Musa went on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he took so much gold that Egypt's economy trembled. That journey is still remembered as the Golden Pilgrimage. A king with so much gold, it made prices crash. Over time, gold became more than money. It became a reason for politics, religion, and war. Gold was offered to please gods in temples and used to fund battles in palaces. Ordinary people knew who had power just by the shine of their gold. Meanwhile, steel had yet to appear on the world stage. This was still the age of gold. One blistering day in Africa's Sahel region, a dust storm rose as camel caravans slowly cut across the desert. Tied to their backs were heavy bundles, not just metal, but gold worth an entire kingdom. The merchants knew one ambush could change a nation's fate. This was the bloodline of empires, gold that could start a war or buy peace. At night, under the starlit desert sky, they lit fires and rested. Far away, the wind stirred the sand, but the men stared into the flames, seeing only the gleam of gold. They knew kings in Europe or pharaohs in Egypt would go to war for what they carried. It wasn't just metal, it was power. And those who held power wrote history. At the same time, thousands of miles away in Rome, a grand palace hall glowed with hundreds of torches. Gold gleamed on wall carvings, the emperor's throne, and the nobility's necks. A Roman treasurer stepped forward and said, "If our army enters Egypt, we can cover 3 years of war expenses. They have gold." The emperor said nothing. The torchlight flickered on his golden crown. The decision was made. War would begin. Time and again, gold changed the course of history. Wherever it gathered, it stirred war, politics, and greed. Pharaohs, Persian kings, Roman emperors, Chinese rulers, they all knew that more important than soldiers or weapons was the treasure hidden in their vaults. Steel still hadn't arrived. Wars were fought with swords, shields, and horses, and those weapons were paid for with gold. Behind every great war in history, somewhere, there was gold. A king looted it, a trader bought an army with it, or a priest played politics with temple gold. In Mesopotamia, trade hubs sprang up. Boats lined the rivers, and caravans arrived from all directions. One old merchant told his son, "Look, Rahim, cloth, spices, incense, their prices change, but gold's doesn't, because it's not just metal, it's trust." The boy asked, "Trust?" The merchant smiled. "Yes, people believe gold doesn't rust or decay. That's why they all want it. As long as there's greed, gold will survive." That belief set gold apart. Over time, it was turned into coins, round, stamped, and traded. Rome, Persia, and India ran their economies with gold coins. These coins funded wars, launched ships, and kept empires alive. In India, too, gold had deep roots. In temples by the Ganges, gold piled up like mountains. Kings offered it at the gods' feet, while priests stored it in royal treasuries. Nearby kingdoms attacked to steal it. Temples became treasure chests, targets of war. Countless temple raids throughout history were driven by one thing: gold. In one southern Indian temple, a king amassed so much gold that it rivaled the combined wealth of several small European kingdoms. When word spread, a northern king marched his army south. A temple built for the gods became a battlefield. The idols weren't the target, the gold was. Gold took on a new role, a symbol of faith. In Hindu temples, Buddhist monasteries, Islamic architecture, and churches, gold represented holiness. Since it doesn't rust or fade, religious leaders saw it as a sign of the divine. That made people's trust in gold even deeper. Gold found itself in a strange place. Kings used it to control, priests for faith, traders for profit, and ordinary people just watched it shine, longing for a glimpse. Slowly, a belief grew strong in people's minds: whoever holds gold holds divine favor. But behind that belief was a harsh truth. History shows gold has never handed out power for free. People fought for it, died for it, and lost entire kingdoms because of it. The world has shed more blood over gold than over any religion. Empire of Gold. Waves crash across the endless Atlantic. Massive wooden galleons drift slowly toward an unknown continent. The year is 1493. Europe is starving, not for food, but for gold. Christopher Columbus has just unlocked the door to a new world, and through that door, the greedy hands of European empires reach straight in. Across the ocean lies a land full of gold, a new El Dorado. At that time, Europe was thick with the smoke of war. Spain and Portugal, hungry for gold, made deals with each other, only to betray those deals when it suited them. Even the Roman Church quietly blessed the expeditions. New lands meant new taxes, new trade, and above all, gold. One morning, the Spanish flag rose on the shores of the Caribbean. As the soldiers landed, they saw something unexpected. Local Taino tribes wearing glittering gold ornaments. To these people, gold was a religious symbol, nothing more than decoration. But to the European soldiers, it meant only one thing: wealth. In that moment, looting, slavery, and killing began. A young Spanish soldier named Diego de Castillo stood on the deck one dark night and said, "If we return with their gold, the king will give us land and titles." Another soldier laughed, "And if we fail, gold will be our coffin." In those few words, the brutal truth of the European expeditions was laid bare. Over the next few decades, the Spanish Empire wiped out countless kingdoms in Central and South America. The lure of gold erased the Inca and Aztec empires from the map. The Incas believed the sun was a god, and gold was its flesh. Their temples held tons of pure gold, all offered in devotion. The Spanish stormed those temples, melted the gold down, packed it in ships, and took it to Europe. No one knew how many lives were soaked into that metal. Indigenous workers crushed in collapsing mines, slain priests, children who died in captivity, all their blood mixed with that gleaming treasure. This was the start of Europe's gold ships, giant vessels loaded with tons of gold crossing the Atlantic. But merchants weren't the only ones aware of these ships. Pirates knew too. English and Dutch raiders floated through the ocean like shadows, seeing gold ships as jackpots from kings themselves. Once, 3 gold-filled Spanish ships set out for Europe. A storm rose at midnight. Hiding within it was the fleet of Francis Drake. They attacked. Cannon fire split the sky. Flames licked the wooden decks. By dawn, 2 of the 3 ships had sunk. The gold now belonged to the pirates. Across Europe, one message echoed: whoever wins the gold writes the history. Meanwhile, European kings weren't relying on theft alone. They realized that gold was the backbone of their economy. In the 18th century, Europe's major powers introduced the gold standard, meaning a country's currency was tied to the amount of gold in its treasury. The more gold you had, the stronger your money. Strong money controlled global trade. The biggest winner of this system? The British Empire. They stole gold from India's soil, shipped it from Africa, and used it to build the banks and backbone of London. The British realized something powerful. Ruling with gold was easier than ruling with war. At the same time, India became the biggest victim of European colonization. Even during the Mughal era, Indian temples and palaces were overflowing with gold. When the Europeans took over Indian ports, they saw the gold shimmer, and they didn't leave empty-handed. That gold left India, and India became a colony. Europe became the master. Gold-fueled wars didn't just happen at sea, they happened on land too. Napoleon's campaigns, Waterloo, and the American Revolution all had gold at their core. It paid for armies, guns, and fleets. Gold was the silent fuel behind every move. During World War II, Nazi forces looted gold from countless European banks and churches. Entire trainloads of gold vanished underground. Some was used to buy weapons, some was hidden away for a future that never came. To this day, the mystery of the Nazi gold train remains unsolved. After the war, gold again sat at the center of a new world order. Through the Bretton Woods Agreement, the United States tied the dollar to gold, and by extension tied the world's currencies to it. Once more, gold sat at the top of the global power pyramid. But then, steel, quiet and unnoticed, was gathering strength. From the rubble of Europe, factories began to rise. In the American Midwest, smoke poured all night from steel mill chimneys. Gold still symbolized power, but the real strength, the actual influence, was shifting to steel. This was the turning point in human history. For the first time, gold and steel stood face to face. On one side, centuries of glory and greed. On the other hand, the barbed wire of industry and the rise of technology.
Iron Revolution. Smoke floated through the night sky like a dark mist. It was the late 18th century in England's industrial towns. The surroundings were dim, but inside the factories, fire glowed hot red. Molten iron churned in massive furnaces. The air was heavy and scorching. Sweat-soaked workers swung hammers by the flames. They didn't know it yet, but at that moment, human history was quietly shifting. A new rival was rising against gold, the long-reigning symbol of power. That rival was steel. Steel is simply a stronger, refined form of iron. For centuries, people had used iron for swords, tools, and farming equipment. But making steel was expensive and difficult, so it remained rare. That changed in 1856 when British engineer Henry Bessemer invented the Bessemer process, a way to produce steel cheaply, quickly, and on a massive scale. With that, the world's economy and politics entered a new era. It was as if fire spread across Europe and America's industrial zones. Where once small factories sat near coal mines, now massive steel industries rose overnight. Smoky skies, train whistles, and the sharp smell of molten metal became the symbols of a new kind of civilization. A British factory owner once told his young son, "Listen, Edward, kings may start wars with gold, but empires survive with steel." History proved him right. Steel reshaped the world. Railways stretched across continents. Long tracks were laid from Europe to Asia so coal, goods, and soldiers could move quickly. In America, the railway reached the Pacific Ocean. Quietly, like a spider weaving its web, steel spread its reach across the globe, much like gold once did. Bridges, ships, weapons, factories, steel ruled everywhere. Gold might build a palace, but steel built a civilization. England, Germany, and America surged ahead in this race. The more steel a country produced, the higher its flag flew. The rise of steel didn't stop at construction. Europe was entering the second industrial revolution. Giant steel factories ran day and night. Trains raced. Warships were built. The center of global power began to shift. Once, gold shaped politics. Now steel was shaping the outcome of wars. One major change came in weaponry. Battles once relied on swords, spears, and cannons. Steel changed everything. Machine guns, tanks, and battleships were born. And with such steel beasts on the field, gold lost its value because gold couldn't win a war. Steel could. In America's Midwest, a new industrial giant emerged, Carnegie Steel. A Scottish immigrant named Andrew Carnegie became one of the richest men on earth through steel. His factories produced tons of it every day. enough to build an entire town's infrastructure in a month. Wealthy businessmen in London, Paris, and Berlin realized steel was the future. With it, they could build not just buildings, but ships, railroads, and war machines. Through steel, they could control the global economy. Gold was still seen as a symbol of power, locked in central banks, worn by kings. But real power was shifting. The nation that made the most steel won the wars, and those who won the wars took the gold. In 1914, World War I began. Behind the politics, alliances, and oil, the spine of the war was steel. Tanks, cannons, railroads, bullets, all were made from it. Some nations held the gold, others held the steel. History shows it was the ones with steel who survived, the rest fell. After World War I, the world map changed. Gold remained in vaults, but the seat of global power moved to the steel industry. America became the largest steel producer in the world. The Empire State Building, towering above New York, became a symbol of that strength. Built entirely of steel, it seemed to challenge gold itself. A few years later came World War II. This time, the roar of tanks and airplanes decided the world's fate. The country that produced the most steel stayed in the fight. Hitler knew you can't run a war on gold, but you can build an empire with steel. That's why Nazi Germany's largest factories were steel plants for weapons. After the war, gold returned as the backbone of global currency, but never regained its throne as a source of real power. That throne now belonged to steel. Because you can't build tanks, lay railroads, or fly planes with gold. Gold shows power. Steel builds power. By the 1950s, the world entered the Cold War. Two superpowers, America and the Soviet Union, competed fiercely in steel production. The more steel, the bigger the factories, the larger the weapon stockpile. Steel was the key to dominance. Gold remained locked away in vaults. During this time, gold was no longer called the king. It had become royal jewelry.
Gold versus steel. City lights flicker under the night sky. Thousands of reflections gleam on the glass walls of towering skyscrapers, like a silent heartbeat of modern civilization. Below, streets roar with beasts of steel. Trains, cars, ships. And somewhere, locked inside a palace vault, lie bars of shining gold, sealed away, watched closely, untouched. It's a clash of two worlds. On one side, gold, the ancient king, now a symbol of luxury and prestige. On the other hand, steel is the backbone of real strength and power. After World War II, the world changed fast. From ruins rose new cities, bridges, and factories. Behind this massive rebuilding stood one thing: steel. Tons of it. The countries that produced the most steel built the most cities, laid the most railways, flew the most planes, and launched the largest fleets. Meanwhile, gold stayed locked in central banks, used only as a currency reserve to stabilize economies. But even that control was slipping. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon made a historic announcement. The dollar would no longer be tied to gold. That ended the gold standard forever. It was a turning point. For thousands of years, gold was the backbone of money. Now, modern economies ran on paper currency and trust. Gold was no longer a direct tool of control. It became a symbol of faith and security. Still, gold didn't vanish. Central banks kept it. Investors and governments held on to it for times of crisis. Even now, when wars erupt, currencies crash or markets tumble, people return to the old glowing metal. Gold became a kind of psychological shield. It doesn't rust. It doesn't fade. It doesn't disappear. But steel grew even stronger.
Modern cities stand on steel. Towers, bridges, trains, warships, planes. At the core of everything, they're steel. Like the Eiffel Tower, a symbol of modern architecture, built with steel. The Empire State Building, soaring skyward with steel's strength. Modern tanks and fighter jets, not gold-plated, but steel-bodied giants. During the Cold War, the world split between two powers, America and the Soviet Union. The race wasn't for gold. It was for steel and technology. The more steel, the bigger the army. The bigger the army, the greater the political grip. Still, gold hasn't left people's hearts. Steel creates power, but gold creates belief. In wealthy cities, gold jewelry still signals royalty. Big investors still stockpile gold just in case. Even during war, gold never lost all its value. It stays, untarnished, indestructible. There was a time when kings funded wars with their gold reserves. Now wars run on steel. But when the war ends, the gold is looted, stacked in vaults, and shown off by the next generation as a sign of wealth. So, gold and steel have traded places over time, each ruling in its own way. Gold was the start of empires. Steel became their foundation. In today's world, gold is the king of symbols. Steel is the king of reality. In the 21st century, the rivalry took a new form. The world entered the digital age. Paper money turned virtual. New challengers appeared. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. Yet even now, people often measure their value against gold, because gold is still the most stable symbol of trust in history. Meanwhile, steel became even more essential than ever. Every piece of infrastructure, hospitals, bridges, satellite pads, rockets, is built with steel or steel-based alloys. If steel vanished for even a moment, modern life would collapse. And if gold disappeared, vaults would empty, jewelry would vanish, economies would wobble, but cities would still stand. That question alone reveals who holds the real power today. One evening, soft light glinted off gold bars in the vault of the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Outside, a steel train thundered past, and a jet with a steel body soared above. A quiet security guard leaned back and whispered, "These gold bars, they never move. But that steel out there, that moves the world." And within that quiet thought lies the story of thousands of years. Gold made kings, built empires, started wars. Steel kept those empires alive and laid the foundation for a new world. Both still remain. Gold, the symbol of trust. Steel, the force in your hands.